I am Tiffany Hayes, 29 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I discovered a simple but bitter truth. Family can be the most dangerous enemy, not through words, not through random criticism, but through the cold click of a new lock on the door that used to be called home that afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina. I stood on the front steps of the classic two-story house of the Hayes family, the place that used to be a home, used to be a shield from the wind, used to be a support, when I thought I had nothing left. But now it was a strange fortress. I put the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, then again. A chill ran down my spine. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone, still thinking there must be some mistake. A message from my sister. Courtney was already waiting on the screen. You're no longer part of this family. Don't come back. I froze. Courtney and I had clashed before. Who doesn't have arguments with their sister? But changing the lock, kicking me out of the house like a stranger, I couldn't imagine it. I banged on the door, called her name, and called for my mother and father. No one answered. Sound of the wind slipping through the white fence. It's like a reminder that I had been erased from this family. The neighbors looked at me with strange eyes. Some avoided eye contact, some gave awkward smiles. In their eyes, I was probably just the failed little sister, the freeloader who got kicked out, but they didn't know anything. I was the child rejected from the first day. I refused to walk the path the family had chosen. Courtney, the golden girl of the Hayes family, was always the symbol of perfection. Good grades, beauty, taking over the family business, always knowing how to make mom and dad proud. And me, I was the odd one out. I drew, I sewed, I dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. Something to my mother was no different than saying I wanted to be a circus artist. I used to try to fit in, used to try to compromise. But for all those years, all I got was disdain, cold stares, and sneering words. Only one person ever stood by me. Grandma Clara, the one who taught me how to hold a needle and thread. The one who believed I could create something different. And now that person was gone. And Courtney. She didn't just lock the door in my face. She also locked away the only way home I had ever known. I clenched my phone, my heart surging with emotion. The next message from Courtney hit me like a punch. Don't think about coming back. I already packed your stuff. Saturday, 5 p.m. Come get it. We won't be home. She thought that was the end. She thought she could kick me to the curb and calmly continue living her model family life. She forgot one thing. I am Clara Hayes' granddaughter, and she never taught me how to give up. I sat silently on the front steps, my eyes fixed on the door that had so coldly turned its back on me. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by a familiar, old sensation I knew all too well. Exclusion. Growing up in the Hayes house meant accepting. One unspoken rule, Courtney's rule. This house, big, beautiful, classic in design, was my family's pride. On the outside, it was a model of success. On the inside, it was a factory that produced illusions. Courtney was the most perfect product of that assembly line. From the moment she could walk, Courtney had been molded as the pride. Academic achievements, awards, and magazine covers. For local real estate, all meticulously calculated, and me. I was the variable. My mother, Marilyn Hayes, managed the family like she ran a corporation. Cold, sharp, no room for deviation. My father, Philip, worked as an accountant for the business. Quiet, always nodding at every decision my mother made, like a shadow, and me. I inherited Grandma Clara's eyes, but no one ever acknowledged that. My grandmother used to whisper into my ear every time we sat cutting fabric. Don't let them clip your wings, Tiffany. She was the rare light in that house full of rigid molds. But when she passed away from cancer, Courtney's shadow only grew bigger. Courtney wasn't just good at real estate. She was even better at manipulating people, especially my mother. I still remember the dinner after Grandma Clara's funeral. While I sat clutching my sketchbook, tears still wet on my face, Courtney beamed, showing off about just having closed a 7-figure mansion deal. That's when I understood, to them, pain had an expiration date. But accomplishments? Never. I used to dream of leaving Asheville, escaping the Hayes family. But life wasn't as straight and smooth as a cut of fabric. My dream of becoming a fashion designer was held back by duty to the family. I had fought. I had thought the thief. I proved I was good enough. They would accept me. But they had never truly seen me. They only saw someone who wasn't Courtney, and that alone was enough to mark me as a failure. Courtney may think she made her final deal by changing the locks and kicking me out. But she forgot one thing. I am Tiffany Hayes. And when cornered, I don't know how to surrender. I took one last look at the house, then turned and walked away. I didn't yet know exactly what the plan would be. But I knew one thing for sure. They had gone too far, and this time I would no longer be the weak little sister they could manipulate. I left the Hayes front steps with empty hands and a heavy heart. But deep inside, a part of my instincts had begun to awaken the instincts of a survivor. The phone in my pocket buzzed. Strange number appeared on the screen. Tiffany Hayes. A deep, steady male voice spoke when I answered. I'm Edward Walsh. I represent the Clara Hayes Trust. I froze, my heart pounding faster. That name, Clara Hayes, pulled me out of the pit of despair. The what? Trust? I asked, my voice hoarse from a sleepless night. I think it's best if you meet me in person. My office is in downtown Asheville. The sooner, the better. I hadn't even had time to ask more questions before he hung up, leaving me standing on the cold sidewalk with hundreds of questions spinning in my head. The Clara Hayes Trust. I had never heard Grandma mention that. But the Hayes name was no stranger to hiding things. Covering up? I knew that better than anyone, but there was only one thing that made me more curious than afraid. If my family had changed the locks, frozen the bank accounts, and cut all ties, then why was Grandma Clara's legal representative calling me, not Courtney? I understood instinctively. The game had begun. And this time, I wasn't a pawn. I returned to the motel, quickly trading my wrinkled jacket for an old blazer. The only piece of clothing left that made me look like a woman who had the right to demand respect. The Walsh and Foster Law Office was located in a high-end glass building in the city center, complete contrast to the cramped motel room and the pile of unpaid bills on my bed. Sitting in the leather conference room, across from me was Edward Walsh, a silver-haired man with eyes as sharp as my mother's when signing contracts. But unlike Marilyn Hayes, his eyes held something I didn't expect. Calculated sympathy. Ms. Hayes. He opened a thick folder, sliding an envelope toward me. Clara left you not just promises, but a plan. I opened the envelope, my heart racing, pages filled with legal terms, and my name, Tiffany Hayes, repeated over and over like a declaration. The Clara Hayes Trust. An independent asset. A house not for Courtney to control, but to protect me. And a financial fund dedicated to my fashion design career. Something I never knew I had. Why? No, I stammered. My eyes still fixed on the weighty words because the trust's monitoring system raised the alarm. Edward replied, his voice steady as steel. Changing the locks without the trust board's approval. That's a blatant violation. I leaned back in my chair, dizziness spreading through my body. Courtney thought she was smart, thought she had gotten rid of me. But she forgot one thing. Grandma Clara didn't just leave me love, she left me weapons. And now I knew exactly how to use them. I left the Hayes front steps with empty hands and a heavy heart. But deep inside, a part of my instincts had begun to awaken the instincts of a survivor. The phone in my pocket buzzed. Strange number appeared on the screen. Tiffany Hayes? A deep, steady male voice spoke when I answered. I'm Edward Walsh. I represent the Clara Hayes Trust. I froze, my heart pounding faster. That name, Clara Hayes, pulled me out of the pit of despair. The what? Trust? I asked, my voice hoarse from a sleepless night. I think it's best if you meet me in person. My office is in downtown Asheville. The sooner, the better. I hadn't even had time to ask more questions before he hung up, leaving me standing on the cold sidewalk with hundreds of questions spinning in my head. The Clara Hayes Trust. I had never heard Grandma mention that. But the Hayes name was no stranger to hiding things. Covering up, I knew that better than anyone. But there was only one thing that made me more curious than afraid. If my family had changed the locks, frozen the bank accounts, and cut all ties, then why was Grandma Clara's legal representative calling me, not Courtney? I understood instinctively the game had begun. And this time I wasn't a pawn. I returned to the motel, quickly trading my wrinkled jacket for an old blazer. It's the only piece of clothing left that made me look like a woman who had the right to demand respect. The Walsh and Foster Law Office was located in a high-end glass building in the city center. A complete contrast to the cramped motel room and the pile of unpaid bills on my bed, sitting in the leather conference room. Across from me was Edward Walsh, a silver-haired man with eyes as sharp as my mother's when signing contracts. But unlike Marilyn Hayes, his eyes held something I didn't expect. Calculated sympathy. Ms. Hayes. He opened a thick folder, sliding an envelope toward me. Clara left you not just promises, but a plan. I opened the envelope, my heart racing. Pages filled with legal terms and my name, Tiffany Hayes, repeated over and over like a declaration. The Clara Hayes Trust, an independent asset. A house not for Courtney to control, but to protect me. And a financial fund dedicated to my fashion design career, something I never knew I had. Why? I stammered, my eyes still fixed on the weighty words. Because the trust's monitoring system raised the alarm. Edward replied, his voice steady as steel. Changing the locks without the trust board's approval. That's a blatant violation. I leaned back in my chair, dizziness spreading through my body. Courtney thought she was smart, thought she had gotten rid of me. But she forgot one thing. Grandma Clara didn't just leave me love, she left me weapons. And now I knew exactly how to use them. The next morning, I was already at Edward Walsh's office. This time, not as the girl who got kicked out of her family, but as a strategic partner. Edward placed a new folder on the glass table, his fingers tapping lightly with the rhythm of a veteran lawyer who had seen through countless dirty games of powerful families. We have two options, he said, his eyes calm but sharp. One, we send a formal notice, warning them about violating the terms of the trust. Two, we go straight to court. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed over my chest, a faint smirk curling on my lips. I choose option 3. Edward raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. I would love to hear that. I pulled the file toward me, taking out pages of documents about the illegal expenses from the Clara Hayes Trust. A new kitchen, luxurious master bedroom, and backyard renovations. It's a total of more than $120,000. My money being funneled by Courtney and my parents to perfect the dream home they loved to flaunt on social media. I want them to ruin their own image. I said, my voice steady but laced with a chilling edge. I'll let them think they're in control while every step they take is already under my hand. Edward smiled, the kind of smile belonging to a lawyer who had confronted countless picture-perfect families on the surface. Rotten to the core inside. Taking back the house without a messy public lawsuit. Clever, I nodded. I'll send Courtney a message. It's just enough to make her anxious, but not enough for her to prepare. That afternoon, I typed a short message. No anger, no resentment, but filled with calculation. Courtney, thanks for teaching me a lesson about family. Don't worry, I'll be home soon. Exactly the way Grandma Clara intended. I didn't say anything more. I knew my sister's nature well, her arrogance, her massive ego, the quiet fear deep down that maybe she never truly controlled. Everything. That message was like a stone tossed into a calm lake, sending ripples of unease. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. My mother's number, Marilyn Hayes. I let the phone ring a few more times before answering. Tiffany. My mother's voice was tense, stripped of its usual arrogant tone. What are you trying to do? I smiled faintly, deliberately keeping my tone harmless. I just want you and Courtney to remember that house doesn't belong to just anyone. A brief silence. I could easily picture my mother glancing toward Courtney, her worried eyes and frantic. Calculations swirling in their head. Can we talk about this privately? Marilyn lowered her voice, for the first time in her life sounding humble. I gently shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. I think it's time everything is discussed in front of a lawyer very soon. I hung up, feeling calmer than I ever had. The game had officially begun. 3 days later, the Walsh and Foster Law Office became the battlefield I had chosen. Not the cold hallways of a courthouse, not the gossip-filled world of social media, but a place where the law and the truth would be peeled back layer by layer. I walked into the conference room, head held high, gripping the folder filled with irrefutable evidence. Across the table, Courtney was already there, her face cold as ice, desperately trying to hide her unease behind a layer of flawless makeup. Next to her was my mother, Marilyn, lips pressed tightly together, eyes full of both suspicion and tension. My father, Philip, sat slouched in the back, eyes as empty as ever, like he never really existed in these family confrontations. Edward Walsh sat at the head of the table, as composed as an invisible judge. Our family's private lawyer, Mrs. Foster, was also present, stacking thick folders in front of her, prepared for either a negotiation or a big explosion. Edward spoke first, his tone polite but unmistakably firm. "Thank you all for being here. Today we will clarify the violations related to the Clara Hayes Trust and the recent illegal actions, including unauthorized lock changes and misuse of the financial trust." Courtney snorted, leaning back in her chair with her usual smug attitude. "Don't exaggerate things. That's my family home. Tiffany's been gone for a long time." I looked straight into her eyes, my voice calm but each word as sharp as a knife. "That house belongs to Grandma Clara, and she made sure I would always have a place there, whether you like it or not." Marilyn jumped in, her voice hoarse with worry. "Does this really have to be blown out of proportion? We're family, Tiffany." I didn't look at her. I simply pulled from my folder a copy of Grandma Clara's handwritten letter, along with a summary of the trust's terms that Edward had prepared. The words were clear. It's impossible to twist. Beneficiary Tiffany Hayes has the permanent right to reside at the property owned by the Clara Hayes Trust, without interference from any other member of the Hayes family, Edward emphasized. Every word. His tone ice cold. Changing the locks and preventing Ms. Tiffany from accessing the home is a blatant violation of the legal terms. Additionally, the use of over $120,000 from the Creative Fund for unrelated renovations is considered misappropriation of assets, and if necessary, we will escalate this to civil and criminal court. Mrs. Foster wiped the sweat from her forehead, flipping through documents in a panic. Courtney could no longer maintain her composure. She clenched her fists tightly, her eyes darting around, desperately looking for an escape. I leaned back in, my chair exhaling softly. Every move I had made was working. They thought they could kick me out of my own life. But they forgot one thing. Grandma Clara didn't just leave behind love. She left behind the tools for me to fight back. After the meeting, I didn't rush to celebrate. I knew Courtney. She wouldn't back down so easily. And I also knew, to truly win, I needed to do more than just lay out documents in front of a lawyer. That night, I returned to the small apartment I had temporarily rented near downtown Asheville. Late at night, I opened the USB drive Edward had given me earlier. Besides the documents about the trust and the house, there was another file, detailed financial statements, every penny from day. Grandma Clara's trust misused for the wrong purposes. I scrolled through the list. Everything looked familiar. The new kitchen, the master bedroom, the Italian dining set, even the crystal chandelier in the living room. But there was one glaring expense that made me reread it twice. $15,000. Private legal consulting. Foster and Associates. I frowned. That wasn't a family legal expense. That was a private expense, pulled directly from my trust. I froze. Courtney didn't just use my money to upgrade the house. Hey, she used that same money to hire a lawyer to fight me. Anger surged, but this time I didn't let it lead the way. I remembered what Grandma Clara had written. They will try to control you, Tiffany, but don't let your emotions make you lose your reason. I needed to gather more evidence, okay? I needed to know how far they had gone in hiding and abusing their power. And I knew exactly who could help Justin. I texted my cousin, "I need you to look into the $15,000 expense from the trust Foster's legal services. If anything's shady, tell me. Keep it completely quiet." The message Wasbury sent. For a minute, when Justin replied, "I've suspected that for a long time. Leave it to me and Tiff. Proud of you. You're finally fighting for yourself." I let out a bitter laugh. Fighting for myself? No, this is for Grandma Clara. For all the years I was looked down on, pushed aside like an outsider in my own family. I closed the laptop, my eyes drifting toward the window where the city lights shimmered. A plan was forming in my mind, clear step by step. This time, I wasn't just taking back the house. I would expose all their wrongdoings. And when the truth came out, they would lose more than they ever imagined. 2 days later, while I was still sitting at the small cafe near my apartment, laptop open in front of me, my phone buzzed. A message from Justin. "I got the files. This is dirtier than you thought." I gripped the coffee cup tighter, my heart pounding. I immediately called him back. Justin's voice was noticeably lower, tense. I reviewed the entire accounting record from Foster and Associates over the past 2 years. That $15,000 wasn't for standard legal consulting, Tiff. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They used it to hire a private investigation service to spy on you." I froze. Everything around me seemed to go still. They spied on me. Yeah. I found the payment records for a private security company, Blackwood Security. They were hired to monitor you while you were still living at home. Your movements, your relationships even, your social media activity. A chill ran down my spine. All those times I saw Mom or Courtney act like they knew everything about what I did. I naively thought they were just guessing. How long have they been spying on me? At least a year, Tiff. Maybe more. And all of it paid for with the money from Grandma Clara's trust meant for you. I clenched my phone tighter, a storm of anger and bitterness surging inside me. They didn't just try to control me with words or cold stares. They tracked my every step, invaded my private life, all under the disguise of family. And the most disgusting part, they did it with the very money Grandma Clara left behind. The money meant to help me freely pursue my dreams. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was an abuse of power. And I knew the law wouldn't tolerate that. "Do you have copies of those files?" I asked, my voice steady again. "Everything. Even the signed contract with Blackwood." "The person who signed it was your mom?" I closed my eyes, the weight of disappointment crushing my chest. I always thought if there was anything decent left in that house, it was my mother. But now the truth was clear. Send everything to Edward right away. "And have you spoken to Foster?" Justin let out a cold laugh. "Foster orchestrated the whole thing. She knew exactly what they were doing. She helped cover it up." I clenched my fist. The upcoming battle wasn't just with my family. It would be with Foster, too, a renowned lawyer in Asheville. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, I had the truth on my side. And I was ready. I opened my laptop, starting to draft an email to Edward. The subject line was short, but packed with resolve, urgent information, abuse of power, and trust funds. Their game was coming to an end. Less than an hour after I sent the email, Edward Walsh called back. His voice was sharp, no longer calm as usual. "Tiffany, I just reviewed all the documents. This is more serious than I expected." I sat up straight, gripping the phone tightly. What do you think we can do? First, the act of spying on an individual using money from a trust fund is a serious violation of privacy, rights, and personal asset protection laws. Secondly, Foster, as the family's lawyer and trust supervisor, simultaneously help them conceal these violations. Okay? That's a blatant conflict of interest. I nodded, a mix of anger and satisfaction rising in me. Finally, their mask was starting to slip. Edward continued, his voice deepening but firm. I've sent all these documents to a close partner, a lawyer specializing in finance and trust fraud. If necessary, we can bring this case to the state Supreme Court. Trust me, once this is exposed, Foster will lose her license, and your mother and Courtney lose all control over the trust. I interrupted, guessing his next words. Edward chuckled dryly. Not just that. With the evidence Justin provided, they may face criminal investigations for asset misappropriation and privacy invasion. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, just as Grandma Clara wrote in her letter. She knew this day would come, and she had prepared everything so I could retaliate legally, systematically, and coldly. I want to take this all the way, I said, my voice resolute. No compromise, no private negotiations. They chose this path. Edward paused for a moment, as if weighing my attitude, then slowly replied, I understand, and I agree. He paused again, then added, however, you must prepare yourself. Your family, especially Courtney, will not sit quietly. They will try everything to smear your reputation, twist the story, make you out to be greedy and a betrayer. I smirked, a cold smile that even surprised me. They've done that my entire life, Edward. But this time, I have something they didn't expect. The law, the truth, and determination. He smiled softly. Good. I'll arrange an official meeting with Foster's representatives, your family, and my new lawyer. The game has begun, Tiffany. I hung up, feeling an indescribable sensation, not fear, but the calm of someone who has seen the entire chessboard. I knew the coming days would be hell for Courtney and my mother. But that was a hell they built with their own hands, and this time I would be the one to light the fire. 3 days later, I stepped into the Walsh and Foster office building, no longer the vulnerable girl I was the first time I came. Today, I came fully prepared and above all with a cold clarity. The spacious meeting room, sunlight pouring through. Large glass panels exposing everything with no place for shadowy tricks. Edward Walsh was already there. Next to him was a tall man, serious-faced. Sharply dressed, he introduced himself quickly. This is Attorney Collins, an expert in trust law and financial fraud. He will directly represent your interests. I shook Collins's hand clearly, feeling the firmness and precision in his gestures. The door opened, and my mother entered first, her face carefully made up, but her swollen eyes revealed sleepless nights. Courtney followed, still arrogant, but her sharp gaze had softened into tension and anxiety. Lastly came Mrs. Foster, once the family's close friend. Her face like a thin sheet of ice, polite but fully guarded. We sat down. No one smiled. No one greeted. The air was thick, as if all masks had been removed. Edward spoke first. Without beating around the bush, we are here to clarify serious violations related to the Clara Hayes Trust, as well as the legal rights of Tiffany Hayes. Foster folded her hands in front of her, wearing a cold smile. I believe this is just a family misunderstanding. Denying Tiffany access to the home is a temporary decision to stabilize the atmosphere after personal conflicts. I chuckled quietly, a laugh with no humor. Stabilize the atmosphere by changing all the locks, taking all my personal belongings, and draining my shared accounts. Sounds very reasonable. Courtney tightened her purse strap, lips pressed tightly. Collins calmly set the thick folder on the table, his voice clear. Not only disabling Tiffany's right to use the home, which is guaranteed by Clause 7 of the trust, But there are also serious signs of asset abuse and embezzlement through unauthorized withdrawals totaling $120,000. Foster tried to stay calm. All expenses were for upgrading the common property, indirectly benefiting Tiffany. Collins interrupted, eyes cold. That's not common property. That's a separate fund established solely for Tiffany's professional development and life stability. Any use outside that purpose without Tiffany's written consent is illegal. The other side of the table, my mother's hands started to shake. Courtney stared at me, her eyes both resentful and visibly shaken. Edward flipped through the documents. Clear copy of Grandma Clara's handwritten letter. I knew this was the knockout blow. Not numbers, not dry law, but love and the après-allet. And the last will of someone no longer here, exposing their schemes. I leaned back, locking eyes with Courtney, my voice calm but icy. I will not ask for the house back. If you love it so much, keep it. But no more money from the trust fund will go into your hands. And from today, I am no longer a toy for you to mold, control, or threaten. Courtney clenched her teeth. My mother lowered her head. Mrs. Foster was silent because she knew this game. They had lost. The conference room fell into a heavy silence after my declaration. Courtney gripped the armrests tightly, her knuckles turning white. My mother lowered her gaze to the table, eyes lost. Philip, still, as always, silent as if he never really was part of this story. Edward didn't let the silence linger. He flipped through another folder, sliding it toward Foster, his voice firm. This is a full report from an independent auditor. Documents clearly proving illegal withdrawals from the trust fund, including bills for home renovations, luxury furniture payments, and even a cash transfer into Mrs. Courtney Hayes' personal account 8 months ago. Courtney paled, trying to hide the panic behind her usual confident mask. I caught that moment, the instant she realized there was no way back. Foster still tried to salvage some dignity. This may just be an administrator. Ms. Tiffany wishes the family can fully compensate that amount, avoiding a scandal. That would damage the Hayes Realty Corporation's reputation. I pressed my lips, locking eyes with her. You're right about one thing. I have no intention of making this a scandal. But not because I'm afraid of tarnishing the family name, but because I'm tired of living in the shadow of that fake reputation. Collins interjected, his voice steady but sharp as a blade. Tiffany has filed a petition to restructure the trust's management. Accordingly, all financial oversight will be transferred to an independent auditing firm and trust counsel, completely removing the Hayes family's interference. Courtney jumped up, chairs scraping loudly. You can't do that. This is my home. This is family property. I stood facing her less than a meter away, my voice colder than ever. You're wrong, Courtney. This is Grandma Clara Hayes' property, and she placed her trust in me, not your greed. Courtney was speechless, eyes red but trying to stand her ground. You've always been Grandma's favorite. Even after she died, you still want to take everything for yourself. I clenched my hands but kept a calm face. I'm not taking anything, Courtney. I'm only reclaiming what's mine. And what Grandma Clara tried to protect for me, even when she was no longer alive. Edward ended the meeting with a short declaration. The Hayes family has 72 hours to sign the trust restructuring agreement. Not, we will file a civil lawsuit for asset embezzlement and breach of beneficiary rights. My mother, Courtney, and Philip quietly gathered their papers, and no one uttered another word as they left. Justin came over and gently patted my shoulder, his eyes a mixture of pride and sorrow. You did it, Tiff. Grandma Clara would be very proud. I nodded softly, feeling somewhat lighter. But deep in my mind, I understood this was not the end, but only the beginning of my new life, no longer shackled by that family. 3 days after the meeting, just as Edward had said, my family sent a response. Not an apology, nor a handshake for reconciliation. It's just a cold email from Mrs. Foster with 4 simple words. Agree to the terms. I sat before the computer, screen eyes fixed on those words, feeling a strange emptiness. No climax, no tantrums or tears of regret like I had imagined. They simply surrendered because they had no other choice. Justin arrived that very evening, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and a thick envelope. "They've signed everything," he said, placing the documents on the table. "The court will approve it next week. From now on, every cent from the fund will be strictly monitored. And you officially have independence from the family." I flipped through each page, my fingers trembling slightly. Black ink on white paper, official. Red stamps, all undeniably clear. I had one. But the feeling inside me was not joy, but emptiness and exhaustion after years drained by invisible battles. Justin sipped his coffee, his eyes softening. "You know, Grandma Clara once told me, some victories don't make you happy, but they're necessary, so you can breathe, live truly." I nodded quietly, my heart heavy. The next day, I returned to the old house one last time, not to reclaim anything, but to firmly close the door on the past. Courtney wasn't there. Only my mother stood on the porch, looking more worn than ever. She hugged me, not a mother's embrace, but the embrace of a woman about to lose all control. "Tiffany." Mom whispered hoarsely, "You may hate me, but don't break this family." I stood still, letting her hold the empty air. When she let go, I looked straight into her eyes. For the first time without looking away, "This family has been broken for a long time. Mom, everyone just hid it until it couldn't be covered up anymore." Mom squeezed my hand, eyes red, but no words of protest. I turned away, stepping across the threshold, stepping through the distorted memories back to myself. And as I left, I knew I hadn't only regained freedom, but reclaimed my self-worth, something they had tried to bury for so many years. The apartment I received from the Clara Hayes Trust was modest, but to me it was bigger than any castle in the world. 1 bedroom. A small living room connected to the kitchen, white walls, rustic wooden floors, and large windows welcoming the morning sunlight flooding in. No more walls of pressure, no more criticism, no more footsteps of Courtney echoing like a countdown to my fate. I stepped inside, placing the key on the brand new kitchen table, feeling a strange sensation, peace. That afternoon, Justin helped me unpack. Boxes piled on boxes, all that remained after years of control. Grandma Clara's old sewing machine. The sketches I had hidden under my bed, cheap rolls of fabric I had bought with my meager salary. When Justin opened the last box, he paused. Inside was a worn leather notebook, its cover still bearing Grandma Clara's slanted handwriting. "For Tiffany, heir to the dreams not yet realized." I opened the notebook, the yellowed pages still holding intact every sketch, every handwritten note from Grandma. The unfinished designs, the hurried stitches, and these words, "Don't let them suffocate your passion. This life, if you don't dare to live true to yourself, then what's the point?" Tears fell, but this time not from sadness, but from gratitude. She had thought of me long ago, prepared everything for me, just waiting for me to be brave, enough to walk on my own. Justin looked at me, smiling softly. "You didn't just get your house back, Tiffany. You got yourself back." I nodded, eyes gazing out the window. Asheville City shimmered under the sunset. Small streets, cute coffee shops, local fashion stores. And maybe, one day soon, a shop bearing my name would appear there. I knew the journey ahead was still long. Family would remain an unhealed scar. But I also knew, from this moment, no one could lock the door to my life again. I had the key to my own life. 2 weeks later, I officially launched my brand Clara's Thread, as a tribute to Grandma Clara and a statement to the world that I was ready to stand on my own 2 feet. The first shop wasn't a flashy storefront on Main Street. It was a small booth at a local art market nestled among painting stalls, handmade crafts, and jewelry. But to me, it was no less than a runway in Paris. I dedicated every night, every minute to preparation. The first dresses were hung neatly, every stitch carefully placed. Each dress, each blouse carried within it love, pain, resistance. And the dream Grandma Clara had passed on to me. On opening day, Justin arrived early, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, Grandma Clara's favorite flower. He handed me a small envelope containing an old photo of me and Grandma. Sitting beside that old sewing machine, I couldn't hold back my tears. She would be so proud. Justin said his ice word, too. People started to visit the booth. At first, just curious looks. But then, one by one, the simple, elegant, modern designs bearing my own colors kept them coming. A young woman, holding a cream linen dress, whispered, "This design feels like it was made for me," smiled, for the first time in my life truly feeling seen and recognized, not for family ties, not for being related, but for my talent and effort. My phone buzzed. A message from a famous boutique in downtown. "Clara's thread has potential. We want to discuss collaboration." I held my breath, hands trembling. This was the opportunity I once thought only existed in dreams. That night I returned to my small apartment. The living room, the old sewing machine still sat silently, like a soulmate. I poured a glass of wine, played Grandma Clara's favorite jazz, then stood by the window watching the city lights sparkle. I remembered everything: the locked door, Courtney's cold eyes, Marilyn's silence, Philip's cowardice. But I also remembered Grandma Clara's warm gaze, Justin's encouraging nod, and myself. The girl who once trembled in front of the old house's door, now able to open the door of her own life. I softly whispered into the void, "See, I did it." I thought after everything that happened, my family would stick to the agreement. Silence, no interference, no contact. But life is never as simple as terms on paper. That night, just after I finished the last order for a client, my phone suddenly rang. A strange number appeared on the screen. I had learned to be cautious with unknown numbers after what Courtney had done, but for some reason, I still pressed answer. On the other end, a familiar voice sounded hoarse, tired, but unmistakable. "Tiffany." "Dad?" I froze for many months. Philip, the always silent father who stood behind Mom and Courtney, had never texted, never called. In my mind, he was a faint shadow of the family, a man who chose to bow his head, silently watching everything unfold without saying a word. I stayed silent for a few seconds, unsure whether to hang up or listen. "Dad? You have no right to call me." His voice cracked. "But I need to see you. Just once. Please." I clenched the phone, emotions swirling wildly inside. Anger, doubt, but also some regret. After all, he was the one who once held me in his arms, helped me piece together those childhood house models. Before giving up control to Marilyn and Courtney, I took a deep breath. "I don't want to hear any more excuses." "Dad, I'm not here to make excuses," he interrupted, voice trembling. "I just want to apologize and tell you, not everything is as you think." Those words made me pause. I was no longer the naive girl easily believing in late apologies. But my intuition told me something was different this time. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "I can't say it over the phone," Philip replied. "Please, give me 10 minutes. At the old cafe where you used to study in school. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to refuse outright, but another part urged me to go. Maybe not because of him, but for myself, to understand more truth. To cut the last tangled threads. I sighed softly. "Okay, but only 10 minutes. Thank you," he said. Then hung up. I put the phone down, my heart racing, a mix of unease and curiosity. The conversation tomorrow might change nothing, but it might also be the final piece in the distorted family puzzle I had carried all along. The next day, right at 5 p.m., I arrived at the old cafe, the little peaceful corner that had once been mine as a student. The red brick walls, the old wooden table in the corner were still there, Only now I was no longer the shy girl who used to sketch designs in her notebook under the pale yellow light. I sat down, lightly gripping my handbag. 10 minutes, I told myself. It's just 10 minutes. Listen, then it's over. At 5:02 p.m., Philip walked in. He looked different, still wearing his familiar office suit, but no longer carrying the dignified air of a man who always agreed with his wife and eldest daughter. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes tired, worn, but in them, for the first time in years, I saw a real hesitation. He sat opposite me, silent for a few seconds as if weighing every word. "Thank you for coming," Philip spoke, his hand trembling slightly as it touched the coffee cup the waiter just brought. I crossed my arms. "Keeping a clear distance, you have 10 minutes. He nodded, his eyes sinking into thought. Then he placed an envelope on the table. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deny what happened. But there are things you need to know. Things your mother and Courtney never wanted you to know." I frowned, staring at the envelope. Was inside? More papers? Another blame game, or a truth I never expected. Philip looked up, facing me straight for the first time. His voice was hoarse, as if each word carried deep regret. "I was weak for too long, Tiffany. I watched them manipulate and suffocate you, just like they did to me. But Clara, she was always the only one brave enough to stand against your mother, and the truth is," he hesitated, clutching his hands, "I and Clara set up that trust fund for you, not just her alone, but your mother and Courtney. They hid everything." I was stunned. "You mean you knew about that trust? About the money? The house?" I asked, emotions rising, a mix of sorrow and anger. Philip nodded, eyes wet. "I knew, and I stayed silent. I let them take your money, push you out of the house. I have no excuse. But now, with everything exposed, I can't just watch anymore." I clenched my hands, ready to unleash all my accumulated anger. But reason held me back. I needed to know everything. Anything else? "What else are you hiding?" I asked coldly. Philip pushed the envelope toward me. Inside are documents, emails, evidence. Everything I could gather about illegal withdrawals, about your mother and Courtney's plan over the years. They didn't just want to push you out, Tiffany. They wanted to erase you from everything. The legacy, the assets, your existence. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding hard. Philip's side eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "I can't fix the past, but I can help you get everything back, if you allow me." I was silent for a few seconds, then folded the envelope into my bag. Looking him in the eye, I answered coldly, "I will take everything back, but not for you, for me, and for Clara." Sang. That I stood up, leaving him sitting there, the man who used to be my father. Now just a faint part of the life I was reshaping on my own. I returned to my apartment as the city lights began to flicker on. In my hand was Philip's envelope, or rather, a partner's conscience waking up far too late. I sat at the table, pulling out each paper. Bank statements, transfer sheets, and emails, exchanged between my mother, Courtney, and a series of unfamiliar names. A full picture emerged. They hadn't just withdrawn money from my fund for things like the new kitchen or the modern jacuzzi, but also moved money through shell companies, shadowy accounts, a sophisticated plan disguised as family. I laughed bitterly. Family? They thought they could push me onto the street and block every way back. No more. Not with me now. I opened my laptop, reviewing all the documents Edward Walsh had given me. Comparing, cross-checking, piecing it together like a puzzle. Philip was right. They wanted to erase me from everything. But their arrogance left traces. I drafted a short email to Edward. Subject: New findings from internal documents. Content: I have more evidence related to Thothamisis of funds and money laundering. From the Creative Fund, need to meet you ASAP. I'm ready for the next step. I hit send. My heart raced, but not from worry, from excitement. Finally, after years of being pushed aside, I had the chance to strike back according to their rules. The next morning, I met Edward again at the law office, this time on my own initiative. He reviewed the pile of documents, raising an eyebrow. "I have to say, you have a sharp eye, Tiffany. This isn't a small infraction. With this evidence, we can request a full overhaul of the trust's management. Courtney, your mother, even Philip, will be removed from controlling Hayes family assets." I nodded, voice firm. "I don't want their apologies. Want them out of power." Edward smiled approvingly, his eyes gleaming with professional sharpness. "I like your thinking." We laid out a detailed plan, file a petition for the court to appoint independent management for all trust assets, simultaneously. I authorized Edward to file civil suits for misappropriation and misuse of funds from my creative fund. I knew the process wouldn't happen overnight, but just filing the lawsuit would be a severe blow to Hayes Realty, the corporation Courtney and my mother fiercely defended. For the first time in years, I felt in control. No longer the disregarded little sister. No longer the crazy dress. Designer at the bottom of the family tree. I am Tiffany Hayes. And soon they will realize that the name isn't easy to erase. The news spread faster than I expected. Less than a week after Edward filed the lawsuit, the name Hayes Realty began appearing on local headlines. But not with praises for selling houses or developing projects. Internal scandal at Hayes Realty. Youngest daughter sues family for inheritance asset misappropriation. Hayes family property under investigation. Control rights at risk of court revocation. Those sensational headlines appeared on every real estate and financial news site in Asheville. And of course, Courtney exploded immediately. Her first message came at midnight, short and cold. "You'll regret making this public, Tiffany." I put my phone down, refusing to reply. Courtney could threaten me all she wanted, but now those words only reflected her desperation. The next morning, went back to Edward's office, this time with another member attending, a financial inspector, appointed by the court to review the Hayes family documents. The inspector, a middle-aged woman, with eyes as sharp as a blade, flipped through every file I and Edward had provided. From bank statements to internal emails between my mother, Courtney, and Philip. Each page was like a punch to the arrogant wall they had built for so long. "Misused funds are not limited to the creative fund," she said, her voice steady but dangerous. I found at least 3 unauthorized withdrawals from the family fund in the past 2 years. I clenched my hands, both angry and relieved. The truth was emerging, every layer of their facade cracking. Edward looked at me and nodded slightly. I understood everything was going in the right direction that night. I received an unexpected call from Philip. He had never initiated contact with me since the meeting at the lawyer's office. I answered, unable to hide my caution. "Tiffany, ... His voice was hoarse and tired. "I know. This can't be fixed. But I want to clarify. I was cowardly. I was silent. I let your mother and Courtney manipulate everything. I knew they were wrong, but I didn't dare face it. Now," he sighed, "I've talked to my private lawyer. I will resign from the trust management board." I closed my eyes, feeling as if a heavy weight had been lifted. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to stand on the right side this time. He hesitated, then added, "You did the right thing, Tiffany." The call ended. No tears. No flowery apologies. But for me, that was enough to understand. Their family was collapsing, not because of me, but because of what they had secretly done for years, and me. I was just the one who dared to light the truth. The day of the trial finally arrived. The Buncombe County Courthouse, the old red brick building located in downtown Asheville, had never given me any feeling other than anxiety. But today, as I stepped through the heavy wooden door, I was no longer the hesitant girl hiding behind Courtney's shadow or my mother's coldness. I was the official heir of Clara Hayes, The person with the strongest legal voice in this courtroom, Edward, walked beside me holding a thick folder, while Justin, my cousin who had quietly supported me, sat in the back row, his eyes encouraging and unwavering. Opposite, Courtney and Marilyn entered, their faces tense while Philip sat silently, avoiding my gaze. Their private lawyer, Mrs. Foster, tried to maintain composure, but the wrinkles on her forehead told the whole story. The trial began. The judge, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a clear voice, quickly got to the point. We are here to verify allegations related to the Clara Hayes Trust, including unauthorized lock changes, asset misappropriation, and breach of fiduciary duty. Edward presented with his trademark cold confidence. Every document, every bank statement, every letter was brought into the light, especially Grandma Clara's handwritten letter in which she foresaw Courtney and the family manipulating the trust was read aloud to the entire court. Courtney lowered her head, Marilyn sat stiffly, and Philip gently closed his eyes as if wanting to escape reality. Then came Mrs. Foster's defense. She cited misunderstandings, management oversights, and didn't forget to emphasize all expenses were for the purpose of upgrading common family real estate. I sat silently, not uttering a single word. I knew this time empty words wouldn't save them. After nearly 3 hours of argument, the judge struck his gavel. The court finds the defendants have seriously violated fiduciary duties. Full management rights of the trust assets will be transferred to an independent trustee appointed by the court. I clenched my fists, a feeling of relief overwhelming everything. Additionally, the defendants must reimburse the misused funds, including $120,000 from the Creative Fund, intended for Ms. Tiffany Hayes. This amount will be deducted from the house value if necessary. Courtney closed her eyes, lips pressed tightly. I knew losing control of the house was like a direct hit to her long-standing pride. Finally, the judge concluded. The court also recognizes Ms. Tiffany Hayes' legal and unlimited right to reside in any property owned by the Clara Hayes Trust. The sound of the wooden gavel echoed, closing the trial. I had one, no noise, no shouting. It's truth and patience. Walking out of the courthouse, I looked up at Asheville's sky, clearer than ever. Edward gently patted my shoulder. Victory isn't always a dramatic scene in a movie. Sometimes it's just black and white on paper and manipulators paying the price they deserve. I nodded, my heart full of determination for the next chapter of my life, a chapter completely free. 3 months after the trial, I stood in the living room of my new apartment, where the morning sun poured through wide glass windows, casting long shadows on the polished wooden floor. This was not the grand colonial-style house of the Hayes family, nor the cold walls of a shabby motel. This was mine, a small space, but filled with freedom. The trust had completed the restitution. The money Courtney and my parents had taken was deducted directly from the value of the house in Asheville. An independent trust organization had taken overthrow management of that house. Courtney no longer controlled anything. As for me, the money in the Creative Fund was fully restored and transferred straight to me, but I chose not to return to that house. I chose to start over in my own way. Clara's Thread, the fashion brand I built from Grandma Clara's legacy, was steadily growing. The debut collection, inspired by childhood memories under her porch, delicate lace patterns, flowing yet strong cuts, had been fully ordered by a local boutique. I still remember the feeling the first time I saw my designs hanging in a store, not a far-off dream, but a real achievement, tangible and touchable, my relationship with my family. Cold but clear. I had never returned to the house in Asheville, nor answered any calls from Marilyn or Philip. Occasionally, Justin updated me. Courtney's struggling with the audit. Everything has to be transparent now, and she hates it. I just smiled, saying nothing more. My silence was the final answer. I once thought I needed them, needed recognition, needed affection. But in reality, I only needed myself, and Grandma Clara had given me that. In the smartest way possible, this morning I received an email from the Asheville Fashion Week organizers. Clara's thread was invited to participate. I sat by the window, looking at the sunbeams shining on my old sketchbook pages, my heart full of gratitude. I thought of Grandma Clara, her determined eyes, her old but steady hands that gave me the first scissors, and her last advice: don't let anyone clip your wings. They tried, they failed. I have flown that afternoon. Justin stopped by, bringing a bottle of wine and a familiar smile. Tiff, I think Grandma Clara is somewhere up high, smiling proudly. I raised my glass to her, to freedom, and to those who dared to underestimate me. We clinked glasses, laughter echoing through the small apartment, and I knew, though the journey is still long still, age-old wounds are not fully healed. I had achieved the most important thing. I reclaimed myself. I rebuilt my life on the ruins of betrayal with determination, intelligence, and dignity. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And this time, no one can lock me out.